right, hello. Welcome to DynamicsCon spring event. My name is Cory Severson. I'm a technical consultant here at Stone Ridge Software. I've worked here now with Stone Ridge for approximately 3 years, and prior to that, working at DFC Consultants, and then Stone Ridge Software bought DFC Consultants, so by default I became a Stone Ridge Software employee. And then prior to that is when I really got started working with Dynamics GP. I worked at Microsoft for 5 years on the analytics team, where I worked with a lot of products people are aware of, called Management Reporter, Forecaster, FRX, Analysis Cubes, Enterprise Reporting. And currently in my role right now, I mostly concentrate on performing integration work, installations of Dynamics GP, and then upgrades. But there's lots of other things that I also do as well, like custom report building and so forth. But before I get started, I just want to say a big thank you to the DynamicsCon folks. It's really still cool to have these events going on, and it's a great learning opportunity for all of us. So again, thank you for allowing me to present at the conference, and for allowing a lot of the others to present as well, so that we can all get out here and learn what's new in the different softwares that we work with. All right, enough of that. We're going to go into my presentation now, and we're going to talk about Dynamics GP workflow. The first thing that we're going to do with the agenda here is we're going to go over just the basics. So we're going to go over the overview and setup for workflow. Then we're going to go over and just talk about the different types of workflows that you have available. Then we're going to talk about designing a workflow, why you would want to do a workflow, and then we're going to create a simple vendor workflow where it's just going to send me an email and tell me to approve a new vendor. Then we're going to get into the holy cow portion of the event or of the presentation, which probably is what drew your attention into help picking my presentation to be one of them that gets presented. And we're going to show you how that you can go in and add fields to those email messages, and how you can add fields in so that you can use them to evaluate different conditions in your workflows. Then we're going to get into the usual at the end, where we're going to have questions, but those questions, not only can you ask me questions during my presentations, because this is a recording, and during the event you can ask me questions as I'm presenting. So I'm going to be there live with you to answer those questions, but then we're also going to have 10 minutes at the end for you to ask me questions, and then I can answer them face to face. All right, on to workflow setup. So the first thing that you want to do with GP workflow is you need to make sure that it's activated and set up. So we're going to switch back and forth here between the PowerPoint slide and Dynamics GP. And rather than just sit here and talk about it, I'm going to go into GP first. So to set up workflow, the first thing you want to do is go to Tools, Setup, Workflow, System, and then Workflow Setup. And you're going to get presented with this screen. I just want to tell you that this screen isn't required to be filled out so that you can work in workflow. You can still utilize GP workflow without having this set up. But this is kind of the magical part here, where it allows you to email, and then once people receive those emails, it allows them to interact with those tasks or approvals that they receive in the email messages. So the first thing that you need to do to activate this screen is enable the email for workflow checkbox. That's going to activate all of these checkboxes in Windows. The second thing you want to do is you need to set up information for your SMTP server. So the email address that the email is going to come from, the display name that the email is going to come with, the connection information for your workflow. So I'm using Gmail here, and I'll explain why I'm doing that here in just a moment. And then the port. So if you're using Office 365 or Gmail, it's going to require you to use a secure connection. And then it's also going to require you to have a user and a password to connect to it. If you have an in-house SMTP or Exchange server, you can utilize that as well. And by using that, you might be able to use the Windows authentication for database engine services credentials to authenticate. Or you might even, if the SMTP server allows you to authenticate anonymously, you might be able to use that as well. So we'll go over a couple of test options here in just a minute so that you can see how that all works and how you can validate which options are working. All right, so the reason why I'm using Gmail is I'm sure a lot of you have received notifications from Microsoft, or you're working with customers or different partners or vendors, and they're giving you information about how basic authentication isn't working anymore, or that you're utilizing multi-factor authentication, and that's not allowing it to work. So I tried to use Office 365, and it did work for a while until our company went to multi-factor authentication. So then I was stuck. Well, I thought, well, I'm using an app password for other emails. I tried that in here. Well, that didn't work either, because the password section here only allows 15 characters, where the app passwords come out as 16 characters. So I was stuck looking for a different option then. And I really feel like in the future we're going to be receiving additional communication from Microsoft and the GP folks on how we're going to be able to continue to use workflow emails. So stay tuned for that. If by the time the presentation is actually live, I will put some more information in the slideshow on the last slide for some helpful tips. The last section, this is where you have the prerequisite if you're going to have folks interacting with you and approving or rejecting or saying they're done with their tasks. You got to get web services configured. It's a pretty simple installation. You go through, you find the GP DVD closest to your version, and then you install that. It goes through an installation process, and once you're finished, you're going to have the option to run a configuration wizard. And when you run through that wizard, that's when you're going to want to tell the configuration wizard which companies you're actually going to want to work with and enable these workflow actions for. All right, so let's test this out and make sure that my emails are working. First thing I want to do is I want to do a test email action. And this is where you can get a little bit fancy or proactive and see more information as to how your testing is going. So if you're changing ports or you're changing different emails that you're utilizing with, you want to make sure that you're adding a little bit of information in the subject here so that it helps you identify which one might have worked and which one might not have. So I'm going to send an email to myself, and I know that I'm using Gmail with port 587. So I'm going to click send test email, and of course, so I wasn't going to get distracted, I closed my email, but now I know I need to open it. So I'm going to open that as the email gets sent. And it's slowly loading over here. Hopefully when it opens up, the email will be available. But you notice that when it came through, it told me that it was going to send a notification email. And now I'm just kind of waiting for that to pop through over here. I don't see anything yet. So I know it did work. It did work previously, and it looks like it's not in my junk either, so we'll just kind of give it a moment here, and then I'm going to go on and I'm going to explain the test email action button. So this one here, all you need to do is once you get your web services configured is you just need to pop in your server name that you installed the web services on and the port number. So there's a default port that you can change during the installation process if you want to. In my case, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to leave it as the default, and I'm just going to click the test email action. And as you can see, it says test succeeds. And if it didn't, it would give you a message indicating that it didn't succeed and you should check with your system administrator. Well, I'm just going to give you some information. There is a console, a security console that installs with the web services. You can check that to see what might be going on. All right, there it did work. So I must have spelt it incorrectly. So I'm going to drag over that message just to show you that I did get an email indicating that the test worked. So there's my test email. Pretty simple. I didn't put my port and stuff in there this time, but utilize that if you're having trouble configuring it so that you know when something might have gone incorrectly or when it worked. The last thing I want to point out is you do have the option to make your web services available externally. So I will put a link at the end of the presentation that you can, or actually during the conference, I'll put the link in that explains how you can append that certificate to the web service so that you can make it external facing and folks could actually interact with the email messages from their phones. All right, again, workflow setup is done now. This is completely, you don't have to set up this section, but I do think it's very worth your time to go through and get this set up so that the emails can be sent and interacted with. within the workflow approval tasks and approvals. All right, so now we're going to head on over to the slideshow again. And we talked about workflow setup. Now we're going to just talk about the workflow calendar a little bit. I don't use this very often, but if you do want to delegate or use the tasks or approvals and you want to give people a certain amount of time before they're required to have a submission or interact with it, you can set up a workflow calendar that will take in holidays or dates where people might be out of the office on PTO. And when you submit a task to them or an approval process, it's going to take that into account and skip over those days and hours that are taken out. So you'll want to set up the workflow calendar just so that people have a specific amount of time to accomplish their tasks. And to get to that, it's just tools, setup, company, and then workflow calendar. And you can set it up each year with the different holidays and dates that you need to account for. The next one I want to talk about is the email messages. This is where we're going to get into the really exciting stuff towards the end of the presentation, where you can see and make your own email messages or actually add those different fields that you want to show supplying or supporting information with those workflow approvals and tasks. I'm just going to pop back over to GP and show you that, and we're going to just discuss that a little bit here as well. So I'm going to actually go into a workflow that we're going to be creating. Tools, setup, company, and then workflow. You can get to just the email messages here under email message setup, but I'm going to go to workflow maintenance, and we're going to pop that open, and I'm going to just show you one of them and how the fields are set in there so that they dynamically work with what you can talk or add in the workflow or that come through from the documents. So we're just going to choose one of these that I've set up for testing. Of course, I don't trust myself that things are going to work automatically, so I did do a little testing. And then here I have, like we talked about earlier, multi-factor authentication set up on my email, and I need to supply an app password so that I can get in to look at this. I could have hit cancel to get in here as well, but I know I'm going to be sending some emails, so we're just going to log in. All right, so on the top, you just got your basic message IDs for the workflow messages, the names, what they're for. Any workflow message that has an asterisk on the end indicates that it is a default workflow from Dynamics GP. You do have the ability to go in and set up all of your own. So, but I will say that the ones that come out of the box are pretty handy, and they pop in there automatically based on the workflow or task that you're doing, and it makes it pretty easy to set up. You'll notice as we look through, we have the body of the email that's going to go out, and there are all these different tags in here with percent symbols around them. Well, those are the tags that you can add that dynamically change with your email messages based on the information from the workflow or from the document or the task that you're sending out. So it makes it really nice because you can actually get some information to the person that needs to approve, and they can make a good informed decision as to whether or not they should approve it or complete the task. Again, you can create your own. Down at the bottom, though, there are the document fields that flow along with the document. So, of course, on this one, we've got information on our vendor. And then there are also the option to choose the different workflow fields. So it's got the deadline of the workflow manager, and any of the different fields that could be helpful in identifying the workflow in the email that gets sent out. All right, that is the message setup. So now I'm just going to go back over to the slideshow, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different workflows that are available within GP. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip that. We're going to go back to that window, and I'm just going to show you right from within the application the different options you have for sending messages. So we're going to go back to Tools, Setup, Company, Workflow, and then Workflow Maintenance. All right, we're going to start at the top of the list. So under Financial, I'm just going to leave off the word approval because it ends on each one. And so you've got General Ledger Account and General Ledger Batch approvals. I'm also just going to go in and say I don't believe any new workflows have been added here over the last couple of version or service pack updates of GP. But if you're not on GP 2018, you're going to want to get on that, and then you're going to have more workflow options available. So the newer the versions, most likely, well, for sure, you're going to have more workflow options at that point, but I don't think any new ones have been added over the last couple of updates. Sales, you've got receivables batch and sales transaction approvals. Under purchasing, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, and you'll notice that this is where I've done most of the testing, you've got payables batch, payables transaction, purchase order, purchase requisition, purchase invoice, receivings transaction, and vendor approval. Under payroll, you have employee profile, employee skills, payroll to direct deposits, payroll time cards, and payroll W-4s. Under project, if you have some folks that use project, you have expense report approvals and timesheet approvals. And then under administration, you have some security roles, security tasks, smart list designer, user approval, and then user security approvals. All right, now we're about halfway through the presentation, and then I just realized that I forgot to discuss with you why you would want to do this and how do you start doing a workflow. So a little nervous doing the presentation, but we'll get to it here. So we're going to go back and do that now. So why would you want to do a workflow? Well, for me, a workflow really allows you to be proactive with a process rather than reactive. So if you're doing a vendor approval or just allowing people to enter vendors, well, you might go in afterwards and say, well, why is this vendor in there? Well, a workflow is going to allow you to be proactive with that. So you can go in and put a process in place and have something to follow, and you're going to be able to review it as it goes. So you're going to create the vendor, it's going to get through the approval process and get approved. So you're going to actually have that process in place, and people are going to follow it, and it allows you to just kind of have controls for the processes that you're going to be going through with the workflow. Whereas if you don't use a workflow, you still have like audit trails, or you can do audit tracking with certain things, or put add-on products in place that are going to keep track of who's doing what. But this workflow is really going to allow you to do put a process in place and hold people accountable. It also, when you're creating a workflow, just take the time up front to go through and design it on a piece of paper, or use Visio or something like that, so that you can document it and make the creation process a little bit easier rather than just jumping in and starting to create it. So that's my take on it. They have been really handy for the folks that have started to use them. All right, so now we're going to go back to the slide, and I'll click on presentation mode. You'll see in the slideshow that I do have the different workflow types so that you can review those afterwards. But now we're going to go in and we're just going to make a very simple vendor approval workflow. And I'm going to talk about the different screens in workflow just to give you a little bit of an explanation as to what different options are available for you. All right, so I'm going to click back on GP, and we're going to go back into our workflow setup screen, and I'm going to go to purchasing. And I'm going to click on vendor approval. And right now I don't have any that are active, so I'm just going to click on vendor approval. And I'm going to talk about this screen here just a little bit. So the workflow type, of course, it's self-explanatory that we're doing a vendor approval. It talks about what the vendor approval process is for. And the window that it's associated with is the vendor maintenance window. And one important item here is the manager of this window. So in my experience, what I thought is only the SA accounts can get to this window. So if that's changed, it might have changed, but I think you want to make sure you get a user in here so that they can come in here and manage the workflows. So in my case, I put Cory Severson in here so that just not only the SA account can get in here and make adjustments, my user can. So you'll also want to make sure you get a manager on your workflow, because those are the people that if someone's not filling out a task and you don't have an alternate approver identified, or if the workflow is late, if you don't have something set up to move to another person, well, this person can come in and manage the workflow. Also, you can't activate the workflow unless you have a person in this window. So that's that. Up at the top, you can save the workflow type. On the ribbon, you can export and import. So if you're creating a workflow in your test system and you want to export it and import it into live, do it, because it's going to make it so that you don't actually get these documents running and in the approval process. And if you have something wrong, well, you want to make sure you test it out first. the new workflow. So we're going to do that now, and we're just going to create a simple vendor workflow. I'm going to call it DynamicsCon. Vendor approval. And I'm going to do the same thing for the description. I'm just going to copy and paste that down there. And in this case, I'm going to hit save my workflow, and then it's going to allow me to move on and add any steps that I need to afterwards. All right, so we're going to talk about the options. So if you want to use the notifications for a lot of the different options that you have when you're working with the tasks or the approvals, you can send notifications for all different kinds of interactions. So when a user submits it, resubmits it, approves it, task is complete, or if they reject it or delegate it, you can turn notifications on for all of them. In my case, I'm just going to turn one on so that you can see what it looks like. We're not going to use this, but so once you submit, it's going to send a message to the workflow originator that that action was completed, and you can also carbon copy folks on it if you want. We're going to hit cancel, and we're going to turn off that. You can allow the approver to delegate tasks. So if someone else needs to do something while you're out, you can allow that person that usually does the approval to delegate it to someone else. You can allow the originator of the submission to be an approver. I'm going to leave that on because while I'm showing you how it works here, I'm going to need to approve it. You can always require at least one approver. So if you're going to do this and it goes through your conditions and you have this on, in my experience, it's always the last person that gets assigned it. So if it doesn't meet the conditions, it gets assigned to the last person. If this is on and you want to use an alternate final approver, if it gets through all the conditions and they're not met and you have this checkbox on, it's then going to assign the workflow to be approved or the task to be completed to this alternate final approver. We're going to unmark those, and then we're going to go to the bottom when the task is overdue. So this works in conjunction with your workflow calendar. You can take no action if it's overdue. It can just sit there and keep notifying the person that their task is overdue. It can escalate to the next approver in the list, or you can escalate it to a specific person, say their manager or something. Or it can just reject the task and put it back to rejected in the queue so that it can get submitted again later. All right, so we're going to leave this as is, and then I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to do a new step. Yep, we'll save it. And there's going to be no action required for this workflow. I'm going to just name it as vendor assigned to Cory. It's going to be an approval step. It could be a task. For example, if you're onboarding new employees and you require certain documents, you can set up like an employee onboarding workflow where you send out messages for, is the I-9 completed? Have they completed their security training? That type of stuff. But we're just going to do an approval this time. The action is always required. We're going to assign it to me. So I'm going to go out. This works in conjunction with your Active Directory. And I'm going to look up my user. I'm going to add it. Click OK. I will leave the apply workflow calendar on. It's going to remind me every 4 hours that I need to complete the task. And I'm also going to send the message. And it automatically populates the message that comes out of the box and is for this actual task. So it's the vendor approval task. I'm going to hit save on it. All right, so we've created a workflow, a very simple one that we're going to be able to actually utilize now, but we need to go in and turn it on. And activate it. So we're going to click on the vendor approval. I'm going to click active, and then I'm going to hit save. So then now I'm going to actually go and test it and see if it works. So once it's saved, I'm going to go back over to Dynamics GP. We're going to go to purchasing, go to vendor, and we're going to create a DynamicsCon vendor. An address in here. I don't know where it is, but we'll just say that it's in Fargo, North Dakota. And then we'll hit submit. And then this is the action. So this is why I'm going to submit it. So new vendor needs approval. That message then gets saved along with the workflow history. And we'll check that out here once the vendor message gets sent. Once it's going through now, it's processing. It takes a little bit of time here. I go over to my email. I see I do have one new message. I'm going to open it. And now you can see this is my email message that just was sent to me. So I've been assigned a new task for the vendor assign. I now have the ability to, there's the actual vendor ID, and I can approve or reject the vendor. So down at the bottom are those dynamic fields that get assigned to the email that I can utilize to make my decision. It looks good to me, so I'm actually going to approve that guy and say, let's get them set up. So now that I have web services installed, it is going to open this window for me to interact with and give a message back to the person that sent the vendor through that it's approved. And then I click the approve button. It's going to go back through and tell me that my approval was sent. I'm going to close my email. I'm then going to go back and open my DynamicsCon user. And you can see if I click view history, all of the information that I just went through is saved in the system, and I've got an audit trail of this vendor getting created. So I submitted it and I approved it. You probably won't want to do that, but it worked. It went through and did exactly what it was supposed to. All right, so now we're going to get into the holy cow of the presentation, where we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how that you have the ability to add fields in to utilize for conditions, and fields that you can add in to utilize for your workflow messages. So, I believe when I first started doing this, I had to go in and maybe I missed that there was the fact that there was a dex.ini switch that could be utilized to add in the dex.ini file that enabled the ability to add tables, but we were adding tables in by doing joins within the workflow tables manually through SQL. But then when I found this field, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So yeah, if you guys have any comments on that, when that actually came out, send it down in the chat and stuff like that. I'm interested to know more about it. And also, just reiterate, you do have the ability to ask me questions anytime during this. I'll be live with you folks here in a couple of weeks when we actually have the conference streaming. So let's go in now and we're going to check out the window with those tasks, what it looks like now. So here's the assign to Cory condition. I'm going to go in and just turn it on to show you what the window looks like without that dex.ini switch on. As you can see, I have really no ability to add additional tables or look at different modules that are available in GP and add that as a selection. So a customer came to us and said, hey, we have our last segment is our department. We want our human resources folks to get assigned any of these payables transactions that are for HR department. And we also have an IT department that I want any of those to get assigned to the IT director for approval on those. So we're like, oh, I guess we'll see if we can figure that out. So you come in here and you look, and there's not a lot to do. I mean, this is the vendor one. You got vendors, different items for vendors, but there's really no way for me to add another table to this to utilize for the conditions. If I go up to the payables transaction approval that I tested with earlier, I'll save my old step. Oh, actually, save that, and then we'll come up to this now. Give it a moment, and if you look here, and I have it set up already, but I'm just going to show you what it looks like without the table options. If I click the drop down, there was an account here. Well, of course I tested that. It's not the account that you would expect. It's the distribution index on the payables transaction. So that was really of no value to me. So then we opened up the magic of utilizing the dex.ini switch. So in order to do that, I have to close GP. And we'll go bring up my GP code folder over here. And I'm going to go into C, Program Files x86, Microsoft Dynamics, and then GP. I'm going to open up my dex.ini switch. And I'll drag that over here, and you will not see this automatically out of the box. But the switch is called Query Designer All Functionality, and then it's either false for off or true for on. If you're using a terminal server, you might want to toggle this back and forth. because you don't want people to go in there and edit those workflows after the fact or see that they can add tables and stuff to it. So if you're just using it on a simple workstation of your own, well, you can leave it on because you're in control of the process yourself. So in this case, I'm going to turn this to true and open up my window so that now I'm going to have the ability to show you how to add those tables. All right, almost there. Fabricam Company. We're going to go, when my menu bar opens here, we'll go up to Workflow Setup, and we'll show you the mind-blowing experience, not mind-numbing. It's mind-blowing that this is available for us. Tools, Setup, Company, Workflow, and then Workflow Maintenance. We'll just hop right on into that purchasing transaction workflow. Payables. And now, if I click the expansion arrow, look at that fancy stuff there. All this information now is available for you to utilize and add new conditions into your workflow to evaluate. Possibilities are almost endless here. So you can see all of the different modules. If you add third-party products on, they're going to be available in here. We've done some for Key to Act. We've done some for different manufacturing things. It's exciting now that you could add this in. First thing you want to do, though, is you want to go in and select the different options that you need to use to evaluate. So I know that I'm going to need to get from my actual purchasing transaction or payables transaction, I'm going to need the distributions, and then I'm going to also need the account master. So I'm going to expand down to purchasing. This takes a little bit to load as well. So once you click the plus symbol, maybe go grab a drink or get a cup of coffee. And then once you get back, it'll be loaded and ready for you to look at and add those different items you need into your workflow. Again, if you have questions as this is loading, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll answer them as we're discussing the presentation. If I scroll down, you can see I already have my PM distribution work open. If I expand that table, I've got the voucher number and then the distribution account. So I'm going to join my payables transaction header to my distribution, and then I'm also going to need this account index for my condition because my 03 is my HR department and 09 is my IT department for my last segment. And then also up under the financial, we're getting close to time here. We've got about 6 minutes to go. So I might speed things up just a tad here, but under here what I have selected is my account index master table and my account number string. So I want my whole string of my account available so that I can evaluate that last segment of the account. And then I don't think it's going to let me click on anything else anyway, so we're going to wait for that to pop open. So there's my account index master. I have this checkbox marked on my account number string. That's going to populate the fields down at the bottom. And if you want to be able to use those in conditions, you have to check the box here. I'm not going to mark the distributions for my work or the voucher. I am going to mark my account index master so that that's available for me to utilize. If I click on link tables, this is where now you're going to be able to see the different drop downs. So the first thing that I did is I selected my distribution, the transaction work, and then I joined that on the right side using an inner join to my distribution table. Then once I had that join created, then I came in and I did my distribution work to my account index master table, and then down here I would use my distribution index joined to my account index, and then my account number string should be available for me to utilize in my conditions. So if you come over to the right side here, you'll see I am using my account number string. So you'll see if I click the drop down, my account index, my string now is available for me to utilize. I'm going to say if it contains the -03 on the end. So I realize that there might be some scenarios where your account structure might catch that in the middle segment or a different segment, but in this case it worked for me. Account number 3 is then going to come out here, and that's going to get assigned to my HR person. My 03 is HR department. And if I want to test this out, I can come over here to the Run Query section, and I can click Execute. And you can see I've got a couple of documents in here that are going to match that criteria. And up at the top, there's the SQL query that it created for me to see basically how it's checking the tables for that information. And just to show you the distribution index up top, you can see that account, distribution account index, that was actually what was called the account, so I knew that wasn't going to be valuable for us to get the information into this to evaluate. All right, so rather than going through and recreating another one of these, we're going to activate this workflow. It doesn't have a very good description in here. We're running a little short on time, but you can see when it evaluates this task, it's going to, of course, assign to me if the string contains 03. It's my HR department going to Cory. And then 09 is also going to go to Cory. I need to get my notes back up here so I know which account when we go create this document on what to send it to. Click to the top. We're going to activate the workflow. We're going to save it. We're going to just go into purchasing. We're going to create a purchasing transaction. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, that's right. Okay. We're going to just do description, testing. Should have a batch in here to add it to. We'll just use good old Lace Travel. Yes. Document number DynamicsCon, and it's going to be for $1,000. And I'm going to go to distributions, and we're going to just make sure that it's going to hit one of my accounts. So we're going to use account 000452009, and we'll click OK. And then we're going to hit submit on that and send it through the workflow. All right, there she goes, and we'll let that go through, and it should grab all of the different email tags and everything. So, but before I go into that, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit more about the email, or the ability to add the fields into emails. This is a little bit more of a technical process. It's not as easy to go in and just add the joins just from that dex.ini switch. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. We talked about how this is going to work, and I just want to point out that these were the couple of the sites that I utilized to find out this information. So the communities has information on it, as well as the FMT Consultants website had some good information, because when you're inserting into these tables, it needs to tell you what each field is for, and it tells you what number specifies a specific type of join. It talks about adding the dictionary IDs for the different modules in GP. So we're just going to skip on into that, and we're going to go, over here and show you those messages now. So tools, setup, company, workflow message setup, actually workflow maintenance. And if we come in here and we go down to the bottom, you'll see the send message. Oh, that's why I need to get my app password back in there. Probably why the emails didn't work. All right, so then down here at the bottom, right now, if I come over to the document lines field, so this is the information that I want to include in my email, the account number and account description would not be in there. So if I open SQL Management Studio, you have to do some insert statements in order to get that information in. So you need to insert into the WF40202 table. That is going to put the information into the fields to be available to select and add them into your message. Then after that, you have to add 2 additional insert statements into the CO00122 table to get the actual email message to be able to identify those as fields to grab. I'll put these in the chat as we're going through just so you can see them, but again, that link out there does show information as to how you can capture, or what fields need to be included and what they actually mean. So here's just a query running where you can see the PM transaction approval at the bottom. If I scroll way down to the bottom, you can see the account number string and the account description that are added. And then also on the CO00122 table, I've added these additional sections at the bottom. The first blank one sets the table up so that it can be joined, and then you added an additional one of the join afterwards. So use those articles. They give a great explanation as to how this works. and it makes it a lot easier to kind of step through what you need to do as well. And again, I'll add the SQL scripts in there for you to see. And I did not receive an email on that one, so I must have made a mistake with it. So I'm just going to go look at my email and show you what one looks like. Yep. All right, just going to show you the email here, that what it looks like once it's finished. You can see now I have account number, the actual account number, and then the actual account description. And that's it. That is the presentation. I just want to give a couple of quick topics here that you're going to want to make sure you want to utilize when you're going through. If you need to make changes to a workflow, here's what needs to be done to be able to get it and go in and make changes. And then tips: use your test company, copy, export and import the things from test. Don't go directly into production. Do database backups. And then here's what I talked about earlier with the email things, where basic authentication is starting to throttle things back without not working. Go out and read through these articles, and it's going to help you troubleshoot why emails might not be working. But that's it. I will talk to you guys in a couple of weeks. We'll actually go through these questions. We'll talk about the questions and everything that you've answered or asked during the presentation. And thank you, everybody, for joining me and watching the GP workflow presentation. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the workflow presentation. Here in Fargo, North Dakota, it's quite a bit warmer than it was 2 weeks ago, so it's finally feeling like spring. So just kind of peeking through the list here, I don't see any questions, so if you have a few, pop them in there now and we'll get them answered for you. I noticed a couple of times, not only is it kind of weird watching yourself present during the process, but yeah, it just feels a little awkward. But I didn't see any questions. I think we answered them all, if there were any previously. So send them on through if you've got them. I'll just talk until some do pop in. But I did notice that I did not include some of the information in there that I said that I would. So keep on the lookout. It was mentioned that the DynamicsCon presentations will be loaded to the website within a month, it said. So I will make sure that I get everything in there, the queries, all the links for the emailing issues that we've struggled with over the last couple of months here. I'll make sure I get all the links that I've utilized to figure those out, or that Microsoft or other GP users have provided me. So that will be available to you to help you do some more troubleshooting. But yeah, other than that, just pop the questions in if you've got them, or any additional comments or helpful items that you've worked through getting through your workflow setups and problems that you've had. St. Patrick's Day is coming up soon, so I'm wearing my week long of green, so I'm excited for that. That'll be fun. I just got a message there. So I guess the thing that I'll elaborate on a little bit is just the email troubleshooting, and keep an eye out for those links that I'm going to send. That Microsoft has a whole email troubleshooting guide for not only the workflows, but also for any emailing documents out of GP too. So keep an eye out on that. And actually, I do see some questions over here on the left now. So some multi-factor authentication issues that I've been seeing is with workflow. It from my understanding is it just doesn't work with multi-factor authentication, because when you set up that application password, it doesn't allow you to get that app password in there. Taking a little bit further, I probably should investigate that there is an MFA option to set up for GP using a client ID, but I think that's actually different than what you would use for emailing workflow, because that setup is all on its own outside of that. So like I mentioned, I do think that there will be more communication from Microsoft to make workflow a little bit easier for emailing with the newer features that are rolling out. I will make sure I get all the links loaded into the PowerPoint so that when you go out and download it. Ooh, the question on 2 decimals. If I figure that out before I load the presentation, I will definitely load that out for that. I'm not sure on that. Let's see. I'll make sure that I get, like I said, all the links out there that will help you get your email working with GP, at least everything that I've had so far. Lots of good questions here. I was looking at the wrong screen. Yeah, I'm not sure about the SQL Server native client, that one. I will make sure if I do get answers to these questions for you on the PowerPoint slide at the end. The last question, experience any issues where the comment before submitting or approving does not show on the workflow email? I can't say that I've experienced that one. Yeah, lots of good questions there. As I said, I will try to get all the answers to those that I couldn't answer directly on the PowerPoint slide at the end. Checking for some more. It looks like I'm not the only one that's been struggling with emailing. So like I said, I'm pretty sure we'll get more communication on that here in the future. Okay, next, another question. Are workflows based on standard configuration that have multiple options that can be further selected? Are the workflow process flow exportable? I know that you can export and import them. I'll get that. I don't know what format they go out to. I would assume maybe like XML or something like that. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if that'd be something that you would be able to submit to the auditors. They'd have to be able to read through that code as to how then they would look inside the files. But I would definitely think taking screenshots or something like that would be useful. Yeah, that's I'll actually test that out and see what it actually does. But that is on the last side. If you are actually going back and forth and utilizing test, you can export your workflows out of test and put them into production. So I do recommend that you do that whenever possible, just to alleviate putting stuff directly into production and breaking stuff. Yeah, the workflows are, I mean, they're basically non-existent in GP right away. So you have the different modules they work with or the different document types. So you do need to go in and configure them completely from scratch. You just kind of have a starting point, and then you have all the different options, conditions that you can add to your own workflows that will accommodate your needs. And yep, with the opening up the query window so that you can add additional tables, third-party products onto it, it really opens up a lot of opportunity to make your workflows more robust from what you used to be able to do. All right, I think we're about to the last of it here. So again, I'll just say thanks to the DynamicsCon folks for putting on this event. It's been great so far. I've learned a lot already just from the one day. And yeah, hopefully see you guys at the next DynamicsCon in the future. Thank you.